Today I'm going to take some of my crafting disasters, I'll explain to you what went wrong, and I'm going to fix them and make them into something beautiful. So keep watching and welcome to my channel. I'm Alana from Upcycling New Zealand. Let's upcycle. I think everybody has a cell phone box in their house somewhere. They're really high quality. And I wanted to paint this one in acrylics, but the paint did not take to the surface of the box. The inside's still in lovely condition, so I'll work on the lid. I got these beautiful decorative papers from the Temu website, and I'm going to use this dragonfly for the face of my box. This decoupage will be as easy as it comes, and there's only this one little difficult area around the sides of the box, so I'll just mark on a couple of pieces of paper the little cutout and cut those out with scissors. I'm using PVA wood glue for this only because I've run out of standard PVA glue. You could use Mod Podge as well. I'll apply it with a fairly stiff paintbrush. You want to apply it with a nice even flat coat of glue so that it doesn't collect and bubble underneath the surface of your paper. I've got this little plastic scraper and I'm just going to make sure that there's no air bubbles underneath. I'm just applying pressure with the paintbrush and with the scraper and applying glue to the surface of the paper. I always push away from the folded corners so that the air bubbles reach the nearest exit. I'm covering all the sides and corners first, and it really doesn't matter which way you do this, but I ensure that I'm going around the corner with a piece of paper and just cutting a slit at the very corner so that I can fold over both sides and they leave a lovely clean corner. I ensured that all of the paper matched my colour aesthetic for this project, so it doesn't matter how much you put on or if you're overlapping, it'll all look good in the end. I made the mistake of being impatient, and because there was glue on the surface, my finger ripped a little piece here, so I'll just put a little patch over the top. You'll notice I've used a ruler to rip the pieces, and that just softens the edges a little bit if you're overlapping your paper. Then I just have to add my dragonfly to the top, and I think this turned out just gorgeous. Tell me what you think in the comments. My next craft disaster was this little tray. I painted it in white chalk paint, which was not the best choice. It attracted the dirt and the paint was just too porous. So I'm going to repaint this in a colour called Craigburn. This is an acrylic interior exterior house paint. I'll apply it with a wide soft bristle brush. This paint will be a lot more hard wearing and it cleans up easily. The roses on the front of this tray are a little raised, so I'm just painting around the edges of those. I did that for both the first and the second coat, and on the third coat I'm going to cover the whole tray. Next I'll take some antiquing wax, and this is just a wet wipe that's dried out. You can use a cloth or a paper towel, and just apply that sparingly around the outside of the tray. This is just to give it some definition and contrast. And I want to make sure that those corners are covered with the antiquing wax, so I'm just using a little paintbrush to add the colour in. Now it looks a bit more aged and less like brand new paint. That will tie into the paper that I'm going to decoupage on the front of the tray. The paper is just a little bit too wide, so I figured out how much I needed to trim off the paper to make sure that it fits nicely and tightly into the inside of the tray. I got this paper from the Temu website, and I'm saving the rest of the paper by using just the sides that I wanted and the centrepiece. I'm using wood PVA glue for this again, and because this paper is really nice and thick, it's going to cover up that raised surface that the roses left. The really tricky part here is making sure that you don't get bubbles and wrinkles under the paper. So I'm doing a very nice smooth coat of glue. Then I'll start by laying one edge down against the edge of the tray, and taking my little plastic scraper, I'm just going to push that right into the edges and push any glue out the sides. For the tray, I'm not going to apply glue to the top of the paper yet because I don't want it to get too wet, which encourages wrinkles. So I've just repeated the process on the right hand side. Then I'll do the same to my centrepiece. I really love this paper, and it's quite hard to get larger than an A4 size piece of paper, so these are just a bit larger than that. They're like A4 and a half. I feel like this was a huge improvement on the tray, the way it looked before. Let me know in the comments what you think. So that's gone down really well, and I can't feel any bumps or wrinkles. I'll let that dry for now. In the meantime, I'll turn it over, and I'm just going to give the back a couple of coats of paint. Then I'm taking some felt and a 20-cent piece. This is fairly thin black felt, and I'll just cut around it and make 4 of these. These will act as a buffer between the tray and the surface that you put it on. So I'm going to attach them with liquid nails, or use any strong glue, and I'm making sure I've spread that glue right across the surface and right up to the edges of each of my dots, and then I'll place them in the 4 corners. Once the front of the tray was dried completely, I added another coat of glue right across the surface of the paper. I allowed that to dry completely, and then I took it off camera and added a sealer coat, which was 2 coats of Rust-Oleum clear coat in a matte finish, and this is done. What do you think of this fix? My next project was not so much a craft fail, but I had this breadboard which I was going to make into a sign. It had a little crack and it turned into a break with a little bit of help from my cat Zipper. So I'm going to take some liquid nails, and I'm putting a really wide bead of that on both sides so that when I press them together it will spread out in the cracks. I'm also going to add some of the PVA wood glue, just to ensure that that fills any gap that the other glue misses. And I'm going to press that together, fill the top gap with some more PVA glue and smooth that over, and then I'll just press my toolbox against it to hold it clamped shut. I let the glue harden for a couple of days, and I'm taking 120 grit sandpaper to sand away all of the glue. For this project, I'm going to be using the flat underside of the breadboard. To decorate the top, I've got this lovely French-inspired stencil, and I'm just going to use double-sided tape to hold that in place. I really love black graphics on wood, so I'm going to use another one of my paint remnants, which I collect from dump stores and salvage, and it's in a black exterior acrylic. I've found that a really hard bristled brush is good for this, and I'm offloading most of the paint, and I'm using a downward dabbing motion across the surface of the stencil. So I'm just tapping away and going over the area again if more paint is needed. This has turned out perfectly on the wood. And off camera I've given this 2 coats of Rust-Oleum clear coat and a matte finish. I wanted to do something with this copper waste paper basket, so I'm going to turn it over and place the breadboard on top and make this a little outdoor coffee table. This option will provide support for the breadboard considering it had a crack in it. So I've centered the basket and I'm just marking the 4 corners where the wire is closest to the board. I'm using Jenga blocks and I'll screw those in across 2 wires each. I've marked where they need to go and I'll drill using a screwdriver bit that matches my screws. How you can tell is by taking your screwdriver bit and my little self-tapping screw and roll them between your fingers. Your screw should just be ever so slightly larger than your drill bit. When I'm drilling, I'm allowing the drill bit to go slightly through to the breadboard to create a pilot hole for my screw. Trick is not to go too far into the breadboard. Once I've made holes for all 4 screws, I'll place the basket on top. And for a tidy finish, I'm taking a drill bit about the size of the head of my screw, making sure that I'm not going to go too deep with my screw, and I'm just taking a little bit off the top for the screw head to sit into. Then I'll get each of my screws started just by drilling it in, and I'm just going to let the head of the screw poke out so it sits into the pilot hole. When I'm drilling the screws in, I'm making sure to slow down when it's almost in. You don't want to over screw it or your screw will become loose. And that's it for this little upcycle. Let me know what you think in the comments. Next was a failed painting attempt on a little tiny canvas. The picture I was painting was too large for the canvas. So I'm taking some more of this lovely decoupaging paper and I'll use the rose on the front this time. So I'm using the same process as I used on the box with a bit of wood glue, and I'll do the sides first, making sure the paper wraps around the corners as I go. You could have this up on a little wall somewhere, maybe between doorways, or use it as a little shelf sitter. The paper actually picks up the canvas look once you've decoupaged it on as well, and that really adds to the charm of this little project. Decoupaging little objects like this with straight sides is so much fun. I never want them to come to an end. So I've put the last layer of glue all over the top and the sides and allowed it to dry. Let me know what you think of this one. This is an old tin that had coloured pencils in it, and I wanted to use chalk paint, and despite the fact it's supposed to be good on metal, it didn't take to the tin. So I'm using some more of this gorgeous decoupage paper. And using the same process, I'm going to cover the lid of the tin, and I'll cover the inside of the lid and the bottom of the tin. Because this has rounded corners on it, when I get to the point where I need to cut a slot, I'm going to cut 2 slots in it, folding over the centre slot first, and this helps it to curve around the corner nice and tidy. This tin has a lovely little rolled lip around the raw edges of the tin, and it gives you somewhere for your paper to push up against and tuck away nice and tidy. It feels so good to dig these dust-covered projects out and actually make something beautiful with them. It's like ticking all the items off your list. I'm not going to glue over the paper on the top of the tin just yet. There are little holes on the back of the tin edge, and I'm just going to paper over those and cut them out with a Stanley knife afterwards. The bottom part of the tin has some little hinges, so I'm just going to mark where those are and cut slots and allow the paper to be glued around them. You could keep your letter writing stationery in this. You could fill it with pens and pencils. You could put love letters and cards from your loved one in it, or any number of things, but I'm going to be putting my craft transfers and stickers in it. I'll use this little French themed stencil on the front. That's why I didn't want to glue the front just yet. And I'll tape that down with masking tape and use the same method with the hard bristled brush and some white chalk paint. And I'll stipple that paint onto the stencil. Then when that was dry, I covered it in another coat of PVA glue, and I just love how this turned out. My last craft fail were these crushed tin can planters, or sometimes called posy pockets. I used some enamel white and some acrylic house paint, but I didn't like the burgundy colour that I started to use on the front, so I put them aside and they've been sitting there gathering dust. So I'm just going to give that shiny part a bit of a sand, then it'll take the paint when I paint over it. I've removed the string that I had, and I'm going to refresh that green paint and give it another couple of coats to cover that burgundy. I'll refresh that lavender coloured house paint as well, and the white is in an enamel, and I'm just going to leave that the way it was. When I made these planters, I lost all of the footage, so I'm going to make some more in a future video so you can see how they're made. For a bit of interest on the front of the tin, I'm using these new waterproof stickers that I got off the Temu website. They sort of have a raised surface and they smell a bit like contact adhesive, so I'm hoping that that means that they're going to adhere really well to the tin. So I'll cut those reasonably close to the image, but I don't want any fussy cut corners if I can help it. Then it's just a case of peeling a little bit of that back. I don't want to do it all at one time, or I'm going to trap too much air between the ridges on my tin. So as I go, I'm going to push that down into the ridges of the tin and remove any air gaps. The plastic film on these stickers is really thick, so it's coping really well with my scraper that I'm using to help push the air out. Then I'll just burnish it on with the plastic backing. That just helps smooth everything out. And I like this much better than the way it looked before. What do you think? I'll finish the second tin with hydrangeas in a vase. Assuming that these stickers do what they say they're going to do, these can be hung outside. I've got these little wooden beads and I'm changing the colour of the cord to this lavender. And I'll just mask off the end so that I have a nice sharp point to push through my beads. It needed a little bit of help from a skewer stick to get it through some of them. So that I don't have to make another pointy end, I'm just going to thread the bead all the way through, thread it onto the tin, get the length that I want, and pull about double, a bit more than double of the thread through so that I can thread the other tin from the other end. I'll just leave enough length to reach the bottom of the tin from the bead and tie a knot. Same with the other side, and that will, when I trim it off, leave enough cord to thread the next tin. I'm unravelling the tails of the cord to create a tassel at either side, and repeated the process on my other tin. Then I'm just going to pull the beads down and tie a knot above the bead, and these will look gorgeous in the garden or on a fence line. Well, that's it from me today. I'm going to leave you with these gorgeous images. Can you believe I work in this place? My job involves regular visits to the waterfront and jetty, and at the moment there is this beautiful bioluminescent plankton at night times. My friend Billy McCann was finally able to capture these difficult images for me. Thank you, Billy. And thank you guys so much for being with me. You know the drill. Like, share and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Bye for now.